And I do want to appreciate all the witnesses that were willing to bear with burning items to give their testimony. Mr. Thurman.
Makes it more compelling. How about that? Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It is an honor to present AB 1496, a proactive measure that will require the Air Resource Board, in consultation with local air districts, to monitor and regulate and ultimately reduce emissions of methane in order to protect air quality, public health, and to reduce global warming. We certainly hope that this bill will pass this committee, and should it, there are a number of amendments that we like to take to appropriations to accomplish these goals. And those would be to monitor and measure high-emission methane hotspots in California in consultation with local air districts, to analyze life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of natural gas produced and imported in California, to update the greenhouse gas emission factors for natural gas used for transportation fuel and electric power generation, and to review and evaluate data and reports of methane as an air pollutant. As many of you know, methane gas is 84 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. For the first 20 years after its release, it's classified as a short-lived climate pollutant with a lifetime of approximately 12 years when released into the atmosphere. Methane has long-lasting impacts as an extremely potent greenhouse gas with 20 to 30 times the warming power of carbon dioxide over a 100-year period, and more than 80 times over a 20-year period. By many estimates, roughly 1/3 of methane emissions in the United States come from the oil and gas industry, while other sources derive from agriculture, waste from homes and businesses, and natural events. In my district, the way we visualize this conversation has to do with the many air health alerts that we receive due to flaring at the local refinery. It's also a source of methane emissions for us. During these flares, we typically have to stay indoors with all of our windows and doors closed. We had one just 2 weeks ago. And for those who have been outside, we're often advised to rinse our eyes and faces to remove those chemicals. So for us, this is a real issue. And of course, in Richmond, we see that our children have twice the national rate of asthma as a result. This is why I respectfully ask for your aye vote. I'm honored today to be joined by some great witnesses, John White from the Clean Power Campaign and Amy Traynor from the West Marin Environmental Action Committee, who've joined us to provide testimony and help in answering any questions.
Mr. Chairman, members, John White with the Clean Power Campaign. We're the sponsor of the bill. We appreciate the need for brevity. We've just pointed out that California needs to do a better job of measuring and monitoring and evaluating the impacts of methane. We think this bill is a modest but an important first step, and we look forward to working with the author and the committee as the bill moves along. This is not a premature act. It's really we're late, and so this is some very important scientific and analytical work that is needed to be done to lay a foundation for what steps we need to take in the future. So we would ask for your aye vote.
Good afternoon, Chair Williams and honorable members of the committee. Amy Traynor with the West Marin Environmental Action Committee. I'd like to thank Assemblymember Thurman for his leadership on this important issue. As Mr. White said, this bill is greatly needed to address the growing amount of methane emissions, given the lack of current regulatory oversight by the California Air Resources Board, and particularly because of the public health and greenhouse gas implications of methane. We like the holistic approach. We like the use of the best available science and the technical analysis. And again, this bill is a little late, and certainly it is timely, as last spring President Obama released a strategy to reduce methane emissions as a key element of his climate action plan. And certainly this will build on both the pioneering leadership that California already has in regulating greenhouse gas emissions and at the Obama administration. So again, we thank you and urge your aye vote.
Other witnesses in support? Just please state your name and your support.
Mr. Chair, members, Brian Early on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Bonnie Holmes Jen with the American Lung Association in California, also in support.
Andrew Grinberg, Clean Water Action in support.
Kyle Jones, Sierra Club California in support.
Kelly Dillon on behalf of California League Conservation Voters in support.
Witnesses in opposition? Come up. If you are in opposition, witnesses, Tweener.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Justin Oldfield with the California Cattlemen's Association. I'd like to clarify our position on the bill. California Cattlemen's, along with Farm Bureau and California Rice Commission, will be removing their opposition as it's presented in the analysis based on the amendments that the Assembly member just discussed. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Lauren Hajik on behalf of the California Rice Commission, and as was stated, based on the proposed amendments, we'll be removing our opposition.
To the committee. There are several amendments. Mr. Wood? It has not. Moved by Mr. Wood. I will second it. Any comments from the committee? The bill does 4 things now, including monitoring and measuring methane hotspots, and wanted to make sure that folks know doing a life cycle GHG emission analysis of natural gas production, update GHG emission factors for natural gas generation and transportation, and review the science on atmospheric reactivity of methane as an ozone precursor. These are good measures, and really appreciate the Assembly member from the East Bay bringing this important issue to the committee. Methane has not been addressed in the same substantive form that carbon emissions have in the state, but of course they have the same result. The great thing about reduction of methane emissions is there is tremendous potential for job growth from the reduction of methane emissions, so it's one more reason to tackle it, and the Chair's recommendation is aye. Would you like to close?
I don't know that I could say it any better than you did. If we can support our environment, our communities, and our economic development, I would respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye. Dolly?
I'm not voting.
Garcia? Hadley? Harper?
Not voting.
McCarty?
Aye.
McCarty, aye. Rendon? Stone? Wood?
Aye.
Wood, aye.
Garcia, aye.
Garcia, aye.
You have 5 votes. There's 4 votes. Several members are in UNC. We will hold the roll open.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Obernolte, and on deck, Mr. Quirk. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, AB 1034 would protect undisturbed lands and help California meet its renewable energy goals by encouraging the siting of renewable energy projects in disturbed mining areas. Now, most of you know that I represent the 33rd District, which is the northern half of San Bernardino County, and on the face of it, you would think that that part of the state would be a perfect place to site renewable energy projects. We have lots of land, we have lots of sunshine, we have lots of wind. But when you start siting projects there, you discover a couple of potential problems, and one of those problems is that you would prefer naturally to site these projects on disturbed areas of land because that mitigates a lot of the environmental concerns, and a lot of our land is undisturbed. Also, when you're going to site a renewable energy project, you need transmission infrastructure for that project. And that transmission infrastructure project is usually located adjacent to the areas where people live. And people don't tend to want to live next to industrial scale renewable energy projects. So when we were looking around for places where we could site these projects, one of the things that's very enticing to us is to site it on mines. We have a lot of mines in San Bernardino County. In fact, at last count, we have 104 of them. And you would think that that would be a perfect place for a renewable energy project. There's transmission infrastructure that's already located there to serve the mining operation. It's on previously disturbed land, and it's usually located far away from where people live. But we have one impediment to doing that, and that is that the mining operators are reluctant to site renewable energy projects there because they fear that siting those projects there would open up the entire mining operation to re-review under the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act, or SMARA. So this bill, AB 1034, would fix that problem by making it clear that only the portions that are newly disturbed by the renewable energy project would be subject to re-review by SMARA. And just to be clear, The project would still be reviewable under CEQA and would still have to comply with all local regulations and permits. So I want to thank the committee staff for working with my office on this bill. They raised some excellent concerns that we are addressing with a recommended amendment, and should the bill pass, we'll commit to taking that. So with me today to further discuss this bill and what it means to our county is San Bernardino County 1st District Supervisor Robert Lovingood.
Good day. Chair Williams. One, I want to thank Assemblyman Obernolte and also the committee. This is a very common sense solution. We have a limited amount of land. If we're going to meet the both federal and state mandates for ever increasing renewables through solar, through PV, through thermal, this is a right step that protects our lands and also really addresses a number of the issues and creates long-term solutions on land that's already disturbed.
Motion by Dolly. I will second it. This is as amended. Witnesses, other witnesses in support, please just state your name and your support. Witnesses in opposition. To the committee. Questions, comments? It's been moved and seconded, and just want to thank you for bringing up a excellent idea and solves one of the basic quandaries of us, of environmentalists. We want more renewables. We don't want it to be destroying land that is rich in biodiversity. Some abandoned mines do have biodiversity, but many are severely degraded land and would be excellent sites. Dealing with one of the impediments is an excellent way to create a win-win for the environment and for jobs. The chair's recommendation is aye. Do you wish to close?
I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye. Dally?
Aye.
Dally, aye. Garcia? Aye. Garcia, aye. Hadley? Harper?
Aye.
Harper, aye. McCarty?
Aye.
McCarty, aye. Rendon? Stone? Wood?
Aye.
Wood, aye. It's got 6 ayes.
6 ayes. Your bill is out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have Mr. Quirk. Item number 2, AB 33.
Yes. Thank you, Chair and members. AB 33 would establish the Climate Change Advisory Council and would task the Council with analyzing various strategies to achieve the statewide greenhouse gas emission limits and to present its findings as recommendations for inclusion in the ARB scoping plan. The 3 major areas that California is concentrated on to support the goals established by AB 32 are electrical generation, building energy use, and transportation fuels. However, the implementation of these ambitious energy and environmental goals is the responsibility of a group of fragmented state agencies that lack a comprehensive plan to effectively move forward any synchronization of these policies to ensure maximum efficiency. As the legislature stands poised to set new greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, it is imperative that ARB, as well as the other necessary state agencies, take a coordinated, rational, and measured approach in determining how to achieve these goals. To that effect, AB 33 would increase the coordination by creating the Climate Change Advisory Council, comprised of the ARB, the CPUC, Air Board, Public Utilities Commission, Energy Commission, State Water Resources Control Board, and the Independent Systems Operator. The principals in this group already meet as energy principals. This would give them an additional task. The Council would then be charged with analyzing various greenhouse emission reduction strategies in the area of electrical generation, advanced transportation, and energy efficiency of buildings. The Council would then present their findings as recommendations for inclusion in the next update to the ARB scoping plan. Lastly, AB 33 would require the Air Resources Board to establish consistent metrics to accurately quantify reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, quantify public health benefits, and measure the cost effectiveness of the various policies and technologies. Thank you for allowing me to present AB 33. I would be happy to answer any of your questions that you might have, and I have some witnesses here in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Michael Shaw, California Manufacturers and Technology Association. We're support, I think, in concept. We're still evaluating different aspects of the bill, but we do appreciate the Assembly members' approach in coming up with a consistent, I think, in a consensus-driven approach to reducing GHG emissions in California. In addition to that, looking at specific and proven metrics and tools for evaluating policies, we think will produce the best quality results, specifically as it relates to economic analyses of various policies, so that we can ensure California, while meeting its obligations and goals regarding reducing greenhouse gas emissions, is also able to be competitive for manufacturing growth in California.
Mr. Chair and members, Brian Early on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Environmental Defense Fund. Both those organizations don't yet at this time have a position on AB 33, but we would like to thank Mr. Quirk very much for his continued leadership on the climate and energy side, and very much look forward to working with Mr. Quirk and his staff as this bill moves through the process.
Yes.
Motion by Garcia. I will second it. Other witnesses?
Lauren Hajic on behalf of the California Biodiesel Alliance in support.
Witnesses in opposition? Witnesses with further tweener comments? To the committee. Just want to appreciate the new direction on this bill and with your continued work on climate change.
Thank you.
Chair's recommendation is aye. Do you wish to close?
I have a lot more work to do on this bill, and thank you for your aye recommendation. I hope you can, the bill passes out today.
Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye. Dally? Garcia? Aye. Garcia, aye. Hadley? Harper? Aye. Harper, aye. McCarty? Aye. McCarty, aye. Rendon? Stone? Wood? Aye. Wood, aye. It's got 5 ayes.
It's got 5 to start with.
Thank you.
Looks like, Mr. Garcia, you get to go to the front of the line because there's no other authors here. Oh, Mr. Mays is back there. Sorry. I didn't see him back there.
I'm going to take it.
Oh.
By default,
Mr. Mays, you are a gentleman.
I will take it by default. Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I bring forward AB 197. This is a measure that will help ensure a reliable and low-carbon grid for Californians by requiring the Public Utilities Commission to consider best fit attributes of renewable energy resources and greenhouse gas emissions when considering renewable energy bids to comply with the Renewable Portfolio Standard. As California moves towards renewable energy resources beyond 33% mandate and achieving the state's greenhouse gas goals, best fit attributes of renewable energy resources, in addition to their total costs, should be taken into consideration. In 2014, the California Independent System Operator reported 4 RPS curtailments due to overgeneration. Currently, overgeneration of specific types of renewables is driving the state to look at imbalanced markets. And as more renewable energy resources come online and we rely less on resources like natural gas, issues dealing with grid reliability will have to be highly considered. Therefore, procuring renewable energy resources with the best fit attributes that ensure grid reliability and help meet the state's greenhouse gas goals should be a priority. Ensuring that these factors are considered in long-term procurement plans will help California achieve a low-carbon and reliable grid. I have with me some witnesses here, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
No, go ahead.
Jan McFarland with Energy Source. I think it's important as we move past 33% RPS to 50% and beyond, consideration of GHG requirements as well as energy and grid reliability benefits is important. I will urge your aye vote.
Mikhail Scavarlo with the Gualco Group here on behalf of Imperial Irrigation District, and with respect to time, we just urge your support.
Mr. Chairman, members, John White with Clean Power Campaign, we support the bill.
Mr. Chair, members, Brian Early on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund in support.
Matt Friedman with the Utility Reform Network, and we support the bill.
Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Witnesses with testimony neither in support nor opposition?
I think that's me. Hi, Melissa Cortez Roth on behalf of the California Wind Energy Association. We have sort of a letter of concern on the bill that we issued to the author's office. We are very supportive of the goals of this bill. We're very supportive of fixing the least cost best fit process. We've supported measures both in the legislature and at the PUC to that effect. Our concern is sort of with the lack of direction with this bill. We think this conversation belongs in the context of the larger 50% conversation. We're trying to figure out what adding in the GHG actually means, and we do sort of have a concern that that will slow the process and the progress at the PUC right now. So we kind of want to take a step back and add this conversation into the larger conversation of your measure. So right now we're sort of in that in-between. But we do support the goals of this bill and addressing the least cost best fit.
Mr. Chair and members, Erin Niemela representing large-scale solar. We are largely in the same position. We submitted a letter of concern to the author's office. Our concern is the ongoing PUC proceeding on this issue and creating an emphasis on certain attributes within best fit, which may preempt a full discussion on others. But we'll continue to work with the author on the bill.
To the committee? While we are in agreement that this should be part of the discussion for the larger RPS, we also believe that there are elements to this bill that are good to discuss and that to use the vehicle as the forum for that discussion. So the chair's recommendation is aye. It's good policy as is, and the author is in discussion about its integration in the RPS. There is also the amendment to make it contingent on the RPS bill, and you've accepted that.
That is correct. Those amendments were put forward in the UNC committee, and so we certainly have adopted those moving forward.
Great. So is that motion inclusive of the amendments? Yes. Great. The motion by Garcia, second by Wood. Chair's recommendation is aye. Would you like to close?
Just in closing, thank you, Mr. Chair, and the staff of the committee for working with us. And lastly, thank Assemblymember Mays for letting me go before him.
All right.
Ask for your aye vote.
Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye. Dowley? Garcia? Aye. Garcia, aye. Hadley? Harper? No. Harper, no. McCarty? Aye. McCarty, aye. Rendon? Stone? Wood? Aye. Wood, aye.
It's got 4 ayes, and there's several members in UNC.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Mays. And on deck is Mr. Chu. So if you work for Mr. Chu, you might send him to committee.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start off with AB 1202, if that's okay. I want to start off on a positive note. Just want to start off to let you know that I will be accepting the proposed committee amendments. Mr. Chair, members, I'm pleased to introduce AB 1202. This bill would provide a reduction in the SRA fee for property owners who are also paying for fire prevention services at the local level. As we know, the SRA fee has been hotly debated since it was created in 2011. While we can debate whether it is the most appropriate way to fund CAL FIRE, what I'm offering here is a modest reform that aims to eliminate the potential for property owners to pay twice for the same service. A 2012 bill that passed this same committee, AB 2474, would have reduced a property's SRA fee by the full amount paid by a property owner to a local fire district. That is not what this bill does. Instead, this is a more modest proposal which recognizes that the intent of the SRA fee is to fund fire prevention, not fire protection or suppression. With that in mind, this bill holds that if a property owner pays a local district for prevention services, the SRA fee should be reduced by the amount paid for those services. It's a simple matter of fairness and of eliminating the potential for double taxation. To be direct, The fiscal effect of the bill will likely be relatively limited in practice, but I believe it is important to put into place for any property owners who may be faced with paying twice for the same service, either now or in the future. Thank you for the consideration.
Your witnesses?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members, good afternoon. David Wolf with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We're in support of the bill. Members, very simply, local voters assess themselves special assessments that they vote on themselves and pay for in order to pay for legitimate fire service where there is a direct benefit to the fee payer in terms of both fire prevention and suppression. It should be noted this is not at all the case what was true for the fire prevention fee that passed out of this very legislature in 2011. There was absolutely no direct benefit to the fee payers in that case, and 800,000 homeowners, we would argue, were egregiously impacted by a double tax who live predominantly in rural areas that are subject to income rates that are not as high. So it's a very egregious double tax that impacts certainly not a majority of Californians. AB 1202, for the reasons the author mentioned, does alleviate this problem, and we'd ask for an aye vote.
Jonathan Clay on behalf of the County of San Diego, also in support. Our County Board of Supervisors had a long-standing policy of opposing the SRA fee, but we feel that this measure provides a little bit of balance now that there is a fee in terms of acknowledging what locals are paying for their local fire districts.
Other witnesses, just state your name and your support.
Jennifer Speck on behalf of the California Association of Realtors, also in support.
Witnesses in opposition? To the committee. Motion by Harper, second by Garcia. I think this is good policy, to not disincentivize the local measures that are just as important for fire prevention. And I appreciate it. This is obviously going to raise my percentage in the Howard Jarvis rates this year. It's a minor miracle. Would you like to close?
I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Chair's recommendation is aye, as amended, to appropriations. Please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
Aye.
Williams, aye. Dally?
Aye.
Dally, aye. Garcia?
Aye.
Garcia, aye. Hadley?
Aye.
Hadley, aye. Harper?
Aye.
Harper, aye. McCarty?
Aye.
McCarty, aye. Rendon? Stone?
Aye.
Stone, aye. Wood?
7 aye votes. And you have item 9.
AB 641?
641.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you, by the way. Mr. Chair, members, I'm happy to introduce AB 641. This bill would require CEQA litigation brought against a housing project to be resolved within 270 days and would prohibit a court from staying or enjoining those housing projects except in certain situations. AB 641 is about trying to address the high cost of housing in California. One startling statistic, the median value of a California home is 144% higher than the national median, yet household income is only 15% higher than the national average. Prices are largely defined by supply, and CEQA litigation has limited the ability to add to the state's supply of housing. While CEQA was intended to provide environmental protections, all too often CEQA is used as a tactic by competing businesses and other organizations which aren't really concerned with preserving environmental quality. In a particularly striking example, a USC student housing project was held up by a competing developer for over 2 years. The competing developer proudly proclaimed its prowess at using CEQA to bomb competing developments. In cases like this, CEQA litigation both increases housing prices directly through litigation expenses and indirectly by artificially limiting the supply of new housing. AB 641 seeks to address the problem not by providing any exemption or by modifying the standards. Instead, the bill merely limits the duration of litigation and prevents a court from staying or enjoining construction. This is a modest reform that follows the precedent set by the Sacramento Kings Arena. True, AB 641 will require courts to work through the affected class of lawsuits more quickly, and true, the bill affects all housing developments and not just pre-selected, well-connected projects. But the state of housing affordability and availability in California justify this change. Again, thank you for consideration.
There's a motion by Dolly, a second by Harper. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. Anthony Sampson with the California Chamber of Commerce. Just to reiterate a little bit, an average California home now costs 2.5 times the national average, while California's monthly rent is about 50% higher than the rest of the country. Now, these high costs are by no means all attributed to CEQA. However, an LAO report earlier this year identifies CEQA and the cost and delay the process often entails as one of the key factors contributing to CEQA's housing crisis. According to the LAO, a review of CEQA documents submitted to the state by California's 10 largest cities between 2004 and 2013 indicates that local agencies took, on average, around 2.5 years to approve housing projects that required an environmental impact report. Those approvals are often subject to further delay by way of the litigation process. Now, AB 641 is not a complete fix to the housing crisis. It does not create an exemption, and in fact, housing development projects will have to go through the same rigorous environmental review as they do today. It simply creates an expedited litigation process which, over time, will help stem the tide of ever-increasing housing costs and ever-decreasing housing supply. I urge your aye vote.
Other witnesses in support, just please state your name and your support.
Cassie Gilson on behalf of the California Building Industry Association in support.
Jennifer Speck on behalf of the California Association of Realtors also in support.
Witnesses in opposition?
Chair and members, Dan Pone for the Judicial Council. I will be brief. Our opposition is similar to a variety of bills you've considered at your recent hearings and for the same reasons. First, just to be very clear, we are not taking any positions on CEQA, its potential need for reforms, nor are we taking any positions on the merits of the underlying projects. Our opposition is on several grounds. First, the timelines under the bill are simply unrealistic and unworkable for the courts. Two, the adverse impact that this kind of litigation has on other cases on the court's dockets. In our view, creating these Uber calendar preferences and special treatment for this particular category of case has the potential of adversely impacting other cases on the court's document, and it undermines fundamental principles around equal access to justice. Finally, the severe limits on the court's ability to issue injunctive relief interferes with the court's discretion and raises serious separation of powers questions. So for all of those reasons, the council remains in opposition to this bill, and we urge your no vote.
Kyle Jones with Sierra Club, California, in opposition to this measure. For many of the reasons that the Judicial Council is in opposition, if there is if without an injunction, projects can continue while continuing to damage the environment. We think restraining the court's ability to enjoin projects while litigation is pending is ill-advised and could lead to lasting damages. With regards to the policy for housing, there are numerous exemptions in CEQA for housing projects, infill projects, and projects that are tiered to existing general plans. So we don't really think that this bill would help the issue entirely. And we respectfully ask for your no vote.
Other witnesses in opposition? To the committee, unless there are witnesses with neither support nor opposition. Mr. McCarty.
Thank you. You know, we're going to hear this, or we're not here, we're going to vote a little bit on a similar issue, but, you know, I think it's hard to just pick winners and losers on this. You know, how do we pick and choose? I think there are, you know, legal issues that Judicial Council laid out, and, you know, appreciate the effort to address the housing crisis. I know there are many ingredients to tackling it, and, you know, hope to tackle some of those later in this year on other policy fronts, but don't think this is the right direction, and do not support the bill. Thanks.
Mr. Hadley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mays, thank you for this bill. I'll only speak briefly to it. I am very much in support of the goals of the bill. We have had similar discussions in this committee over the last couple weeks, and just as I originally voted no on AB 311, I am going to vote no on this today. I do take seriously the structural concerns of the first witness in opposition to the bill, but there is absolutely no question that the abuses that you describe are real, that the delays in construction are real, and that the related impacts on housing affordability and housing availability are very real. And so I don't believe that your bill quite solves those problems, but I do challenge the opponents of this legislation and other similar legislation to work constructively on real CEQA reform, or we are going to have no choice as a state but to adopt more blunt instrument solutions to this process, to these problems, so that we can get Californians, among other things, the housing that they require. So I am going to vote no, but I would love to work with your office and with the chairman, if he's so inclined, to try to move this forward.
Other comments from the committee? You know, I don't want to add to the very articulated comments of the Judicial Council. I thought that put it succinctly. I would only add that the Sacramento Kings bill, since that's what everybody likes to model these after, is a specific project with specific mitigations written into the bill. This and the previous bill that attempted to do the same for water projects are an unknown number of future projects with unknown impacts with no mitigations spelled out in the bill. So they are not the same. And I would also add that the timelines of the King's bill have already been a little bit of an issue as articulated by the Judicial Council. So they appear to have a adverse impact on other cases before the courts. So the chair's recommendation is a no on this, and we do have a motion and a second. Would you like to close?
Thank you so much again for hearing this. Thank you for your comments. We do know that in California, housing affordability, some would call it a crisis. If you take the supplemental measure, when we talk about poverty, we add in housing costs and other cost of living increases, we have the highest poverty rate in the nation. And we do know that CEQA has an adverse impact on housing supply in California. So I'd request an aye vote.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Assemblymember Williams?
No.
Williams, no. Dowley?
Aye.
Dowley, aye. Garcia? No. Garcia, no. Hadley?
No.
Hadley, no. Harper?
Aye.
Harper, aye. McCarty?
No.
McCarty, no. Rendon? Stone?
No.
Stone, no. Wood? It's got 2 votes.
It's got 2 votes.